Islamic studies to religious studies and back again. This is the post-decolonial, the paper that has the decolonizing Islamic studies in it. So what I'm hoping to do with that, like I've done with the others, is also just to show you the opening up the way I'm thinking about it. I'm very much about the method. I'm hoping that you can see me, how I'm presenting and developing the method, because I don't want to assume that it is just some kind of a magic hat, you know, that I'm pulling these things out, that I'm thinking about them in a systematic way. And I hope that, I wish I'd been a little bit more systematic. I think the results would have been better, but at least for want of a better, for anything, at least they have led to something. At least you can do that. So the question here has always been almost a question that has been, you know, at the top of my mind, or at least I've been working with this for a long time, since I was introduced to the study of religion at Temple University. And at Temple University, I studied with Ismail Farouqi and Sayyid Hussein Nasser, and they were of the view that, you know, the study of religion and the study of Islam works very well with each other. In fact, they used to argue that Islam has got a study of religion a long time, a long time ago. But as I started to get to study more the study of religion, I realized that there was a difference between the two. And so since then, I have been sitting with this relationship. Even though my teachers had told me that actually Islam has got a study of religion, but I, through my own reading and my own engagement with the subject, I realized that the two are very different. You know, that the study of religion as it has been developing in Europe, you know, for the last 200 years is quite different from the study of Islam. So it's in that context that I'm approaching decolonization, the study of decolonizing Islamic studies. So in the study of religion, for example, we think about Islam is an example. Islam is one of the religions, so many different religions. So that's why it becomes a subject of study. Religion is a genus, it is a general category, and Islam is like Christianity, old religions, new religions, all are different religions as such. But when you look at Muslim scholars in the tradition, and I'm emphasizing the scholarly, you know, engagement, not the religious engagement, although sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish between the two, but I'm turning my attention to the scholarly apparatus that is used by Muslim intellectuals, you know, from the beginning right now. What to do with Muslims who study religion? So you have people, Muslims themselves, who are studying religion, and they are part of the tradition. And I think that this is something that the study of religion has not actually faced. In fact, they are finding it very difficult to accept. Even though I tell some of my colleagues, yeah, Muslim scholars are studying religion, then they will tell you, no, they're not studying like we are studying. But when you look at them studying religion, studying people who study religion, they include Christians who are doing that. They include Christian theologians who are doing that. So sometimes I think that they are reluctant to include Muslim theologians, Muslim intellectuals who are religious scholars. And so that is the problematic, in a sense, in the way that I'm presenting it to you in the study of in this particular paper, that I'm raising this as a problematic, as a way of trying to address my question. So, with that kind of a brief background, what I then began with is what is the study of religion under the post-colonial spotlight? So in the last 20 years or so, there have been a lot of scholars who have said that the study of religion should actually be looked at critically. So this was what we call the postmodernist term. In postmodernism from around the 1980s are beginning to say, no, we have to study the study of religion. One of the examples was Masuzawa, one of the people that I represented to you earlier. So one of the things that they are saying, as part of the critical postmodernist, post-colonial, not so much post-colonial yet, but the postmodernist approach, they're saying religion is not a native category. So this is one of the important insights that comes from Jonathan Z. Smith, that religion has been created by scholars. That since people started discussing or started investigating religion, remember what I said is that they study all religions, and they say there is some kind of an essential, a natural religion. There's a deep religion that is there among all the religions. That's how they study it. So the postmodernists say that this term, religion, is an invention. It is not something that is there. So they would say, from their perspective, that when you look at African religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, all of these, they are different ways. The fact that we call them religions is a very constructive step. We are creating this category, like we are saying all of these things belong to each other. If I can explain that, what that means is that, for example, if you say that a lion, a leopard, a cheetah, these are all cats. They are all cats, and we can use the category of cats. But biologists will give you the reason why they are cats. We call them cats. I don't know the reason now. I studied biology a long time ago. But, for example, if you use the easier word mammals, they all have hair, they give birth to babies, live babies, and all of that. That makes them mammals. But if you think about it, that's the same way, that the same system they use for religion. But then if you ask them, what is the similar thing in all religions, there's a lot of things that break down. Okay. So scholars of religion, by saying that Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, so the most interesting example they often use is that Buddhism. So Buddhism doesn't have a God. So therefore, it should be out of the category. You shouldn't consider Buddhism a religion. But Buddhism has got something else like other religions. So you can see it's a bit of a shaky analysis that you are doing. And that's what the scholars were saying. But the subtext of this criticism is that religion is a product of Western enlightenment. So while they are saying that religion is not a native category, that religion is not coming from the religions themselves, I know you as all Muslims, I think this is the most obvious thing, right? Because we have deens. Muslims have this idea that we have all of these are adyan. But forget that for a moment. Okay? If you don't have that Quranic view, it's difficult to relate all of them to each other. That's what I'm saying. But coming back to this postmodernist tradition, what I'm saying is that the subtext of this is that religion is a product of Western enlightenment. It's a Western category. And it's not only a subtext, it is also what not all of them, but some of the scholars actually say, that we are the ones who produce the study of religion. This is our Western infra. So it's a critical view, it's a postmodernist view, it's a deconstructivist view, but it is also a claim of the West to say that we are the ones who have done this, and those people who say that, they say that everybody else has to follow it. So, I think the other sort of other critical comment in the study of religion, in this larger group of people who are looking at this, the study of religion, when they are looking at the study of religion in the last 200 years, they detect in it that the study of religion is an apology for Christian theology. Now, that is what I'm saying, actually. I haven't, this is not somebody, in the last 2 or 3 years when we've been reading these books, we realize that every now and then, when the scholars of religion are arguing about religion, they are using Christianity as a model. So one day I think I'm going to write a paper about that how Christianity and study of religion is very closely connected. So what I'm doing now is actually a critique of the study of religion. I'm engaging about how scholars criticize the study of religions. So I'm actually putting myself there as well. That's the second point. As I was thinking about, it's not in your paper, but I think I'm adding it there. The third approach, third value of this is that the study of religion and colonialism has been closely connected with each other. And this is the work of one of our former, is retired now, David Chittister, who has shown in many of his work that the study of religion and imperialism and colonialism were very closely connected with each other. That the people who were collecting the materials from Australia and Africa from these original religions were actually in the service of colonialism, in the service of empire. So what we are saying here is that this is a critique of the study of religion. So the study of religion has developed, like I said, in the way that we think about what I'm talking about it earlier today. has developed over 200 years. We can say more or less 200, or if you start from Immanuel Kant, say maybe 250, 300 years. And this is the criticism that has been developing about the study of religion within the study of religion. So there's a kind of an internal critique. And this is what I'm summarizing, these three important points, and you'll see more elaboration in my article. Stop me if you like, but I want to then go, what is Islamic studies? What has been the same kind of reflection and debate about Islamic studies? What is Islamic studies? What has been the discussion and debate about Islamic studies? Well, I start with Orientalism, Edward Said, because he should be considered to be one of the first people who put forward a very critical scholarship about what is Islamic studies in the modern university, in the modern West. And Edward Said, as you know, said that Orientalism is that the West were basically trying to understand Islam as something, the antithesis of the West, as the opposite of the West. It was a project, it was a way of understanding the other to be completely different from myself. So every time they would study Islam, oh, it doesn't have enough democracy because we got it. Or we are enlightened, they were not enlightened. We are modern, they were traditional. And he also said, very much like David Chidester, and Chidester was very influenced by Edward Said, that it was part of empire. Okay. So it was the representation of Islam, according to Edward Said, represented by Orientalist scholarship, by European scholars, was not an accurate reflection of what Muslims were and what Islam was more in the service of empire, was more helping them to think of themselves as Western people, to think of themselves as, and also to carry out kind of projects, colonial projects that they were doing. So there was, Islamic studies was on that. Many people have accepted that. So there are some people who criticize him, who say that maybe he was generalizing too much, and not all Orientalists were like that as such. But this has been a major criticism in the study of Islam. And that criticism, a lot of scholars after 1980, they tried to adjust it, they tried to respond to it and make adjustment in the study of Islam. And I've identified at least two of those. You've seen some of the names, seen Salvatore again. Armando Salvatore has argued that in many books as such, that he said Islam has its own modernity. That Islam has got a very unique idea of modernity, modernization, and he sort of traces it back to the past. He also links it to other trends within Europe. But he is using Max Weber, but he's applying it in a much more fruitful way, to think about modernity and modern Islam. In fact, he says Islam is already modern. That's one of his kind of ideas that he comes up with. But he has tried to, it's a kind of a response to this Orientalism, and his attempt to try and find another way of understanding Muslim societies, not using only the terms of the same terms that were used by the earlier Orientalists and other scholars, but is trying to, there is still a sort of a connection between European ideas of modernity, but he's willing to say that between the two, a Mediterranean, because he uses this idea north of the Mediterranean, south of the Mediterranean, and he plays around with that idea. Among anthropologists, there are many people who actually take the view that there are only Islams, not Islam. That what you have to, they take the view that you have many different Islams. And that's why I was, in response to Assam earlier, I was saying, well, this is I see this as a response to Orientalism, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not sufficient as an intellectual project to say there's an Islam of this, Islam of this. What do you mean by that? Often the scholars are not satisfied. I'm not very satisfied with those kind of answers as such. So their argument is that there are Islams, but not Islam. So rather, previously people who said Islam is this, Islam is that. Now he says no. You have to recognize that there are always differences and there are varieties. So this is the way Western scholarship on Islam works as such. I think I've hinted to some of it already. Okay. A third approach has been by Talal Asad, I think I dropped his name earlier, is Islam is a discourse. And this is, he developed it in the 1980s, late 1980s, and then in the development of a lot of scholars, and some of his students have taken it up as such.
And this was that Islam is a discourse. When you think about it, Islam is a language by which Muslims are often talking to each other. This language helps to create societies, to think about societies, to think about power, authority, to think about values. All of that comes through discourse. So where he's arguing against the earlier scholars who were trying to just look at Muslims and make up their minds what they are, he says, no, you have to talk to them, and you have to listen to them. You have to be in them. When you listen to them, then you can see the kind of discursive tradition, or kind of a discourse that is going around with them as such. So these were, at least Islamic studies, you can see there's a kind of an introspection about what is Islamic studies. Now, my suggestion my argument in this paper is that I think that there are limitations in both of these approaches as such. When we think about religious studies, well, I'm arguing that religious studies doesn't know what to do with Muslim intellectuals who are reflectively thinking about Islam, who are not believers, who are not first and foremost, I mean, they are believers, but they first and foremost, they are intellectuals. They are always thinking about the history of Islam, they're thinking about the future of Islam, they're thinking about, the different predicaments that Muslims are finding themselves, but they are not doing that talking in the mosque and the madrasa, but they're often, writing about it like the philosophers did earlier, or people like, as I said, the major intellectuals in Islamic history. So one has to recognize them as intellectuals, in spite of the fact that we only see them as theologians, as insiders. Secondly, I think that when you look at Islamic studies, my argument has been, as you can see that I'm engaging with Talal Asad, that they are, and I'm particularly looking at Talal Asad because he's the person that I've been most influenced by, and I like the idea of discourse because it seems to me that when you think about Muslims, when you look at the discourse, you can appreciate what happens. But as I tried to show you in the paper, that there's a limitation of how far Talal Asad is going, is taking the discourse. He is also limiting himself to the participants, the religious participants, not the intellectuals. So as a result of that, I'm saying that the Muslim intellectuals are getting left out. In the paper, what I tried to do was to give you some examples of people who have this critical engagement with the tradition. They are thinking and writing about religion, truth, experience, and obligation. So I'm thinking about, I haven't done it in this paper because in this paper I was talking more about modern intellectuals from the 19th century onwards. And my question is, what is the engagement? What are the questions that they're asking? What are the methods? And what are the results? And I am identifying, when I look at Abdu, Nasir Abu Zaid, Shahab Ahmad, I just added that as well because that's a book that I read recently. But I showed you in this paper, how are they working with deen, with the idea of deen? How are they defining deen? What are they sort of articulating it? And I'm seeing that they're using it for a very different purpose from the way European or Western intellectuals have done. You can engage with me more in terms of what they do, how they did it, but I just thought of showing you this in a general sense as such, and then we can. So I concluded, but what I want to do in this paper is to, in a sense, to provincialize the study of religions, but also learn from it as you criticize it, to think about, I accept the fact that the study of religion is a Western product, so I'm not necessarily rejecting it, but at the same time, I'm emphasizing how it is located, how it is located, how Western it is, how specific it is to the history of Europe, by showing you how, when you turn to Muslim intellectuals and how they understand religion, is so very different from theirs. Remember, when I first looked at this book, at this material, at the data here that I was looking at, I wasn't immediately aware that Muslim intellectuals were working parallel to the Western intellectuals. I sort of thought that maybe they had some knowledge of what was going on in the West. But as I started looking at the dates and when they were working, it was actually at the same time. One of the earliest people who have thought about this issue was Sayyid Ahmad Khan in India, and he already started thinking about this in 1857, 1850s. And these were ideas, somebody like Max Weber comes much later. Well, some of the European intellectuals come before that, but you don't get any, Sayyid Ahmad Khan doesn't actually ever talk about them. So I think he is deriving much of his ideas from his own Islamic introduction than from the Europeans. So that's the first sort of, the term is very catchy now, to provincialize from Chakrabarti the study of religions. I want to turn attention to how non-Western scholars engage religions and traditions. I mentioned Islam, but I think potentially I've come across some Indian scholars and Chinese scholars who have told me that they are also looking at something similar, that the scholars in these regions are also doing that. So we can begin to see really an alternative way of understanding religion from this perspective. And that means it's to develop new questions and new projects. I mean, just the very beginning of it. And it means that to sustain the questions and the answers that we are given, listen to the South and engage with the South. So it's about 10,000 words, but basically that's a summary that I can that I hope that I've shared with you, and I hope that you have any other questions and comments. We can follow that up.